DodgerHeads presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined today by Daniel Starkand, and today we are talking Chris Taylor, CT3, the playoff hero for the Los Angeles Dodgers, continuing our series of breaking down the 5 major free agents the Dodgers have due for free agency right now, currently free agents. And today, as I said, we're talking Chris Taylor. Daniel, this is a guy who was an all-star in the first half of the season. We made a big deal about how he needs to be an all-star, how he deserves to be an all-star. He struggled down the stretch to the point where he was actually benched in the wild card game, comes off of the bench. Yours truly, I'll admit it, was not happy that he came into the game for A.J. Pollock. He comes into the game. He hits a walk-off home run, one of the best moments in Dodger history. Of course, the fact that they lose in the NLCS will tarnish it a bit. But Chris Taylor, a free agent, we know he can play a bunch of different positions. How big of a priority should he be for the Dodgers?
I'd say a pretty big one, and I guess it kind of depends on like what happens with Seager, because if they re-sign Corey Seager, then I'd say it's a foregone conclusion that Chris Taylor is gone. But let's say if they don't re-sign Corey Seager, I don't really expect them to go after one of the other big shortstops on the market, like a Correa or Story or whatever, just because you have Trey Turner who could go to shortstop. And then, you have other needs elsewhere. And I think Chris Taylor kind of would fill a lot of those needs all by himself. Like he could play outfield, he could play infield. He swings the bat really well. So I definitely think he should be high on the priority list. If you're not willing to give Seager the $300+ million deal or whatever, I think Chris Taylor is, I'd say he's not as good of a player as Corey Seager, but what he is he's more versatile. He's more durable. Like, I don't think we've ever seen Chris Taylor really get injured. And he's going to get a lot less money. So I definitely think that's a nice little consolation prize. Looking at this roster, like let's say they let Seager walk, I think you're still okay with like Justin Turner at third base, Trey Turner at short, Lux at second, Pollock in left, and then, obviously everyone else in their normal positions. But you can't really count on all those guys to be everyday players or to stay healthy or whatever. And the Dodgers don't really have like a utility guy that could replace him. Like I think we're a lot lower on Zach McKinstry now than we were a year ago. I still think he could be a productive player, but I don't think he's anywhere close to being Chris Taylor. So I think if you're not re-signing Corey Seager, I definitely think Chris Taylor should probably be number one on your priority list. Yeah, it's interesting
because we got spoiled with Kike Hernandez and Chris Taylor in thinking that, well, if a guy can play all these different positions, great. Well, those two guys play all of those positions at a very good level, a very high level. And McKinstry was a reminder that just because you can play left field and because you can play second base doesn't mean you are going to play well at those positions. What's interesting to me about Taylor, I mean, you could look at the numbers over the last 3 seasons, an OPS just under 800, weighted runs created of 114, so 14% above average. For context, his weighted runs created plus the exact same as Trevor Story's. So from an offensive perspective, he is about as good as Trevor Story when you take all that stuff into account. He's hit 40 home runs over the past 3 years. Of course, last season was his best season, at least the first half was. And so the thing that's key to me about Chris Taylor is he seems to be the one utility guy that doesn't mind being a utility guy, which I think is a really valuable thing. He seems to be the one guy that doesn't care if he's playing left field one day, center field the next, second base, then shortstop, then third. He's fine with it. He just wants to play every day, and the Dodgers can make that happen. Keep in mind, many people expect the DH to come into the National League this year, which would then open up a spot at third base if Justin Turner becomes that guy. Of course, who knows, maybe Albert Pujols resigns, and he could play some DH. Edwin Rios, a guy that we've all sort of semi-forgotten about because he missed basically the entire season. Zach McKinstry, some other guys, but to me, Chris Taylor plugs a lot of those holes. He's some insurance against Gavin Lux. Which Gavin Lux do we see? Is it the last month and a half of the season where he was basically everything that you had hoped he would be offensively? Or is it the guy that got sent down to the minors halfway through the season because he was really struggling? To me, Chris Taylor, I'm with you. If they don't sign Corey Seager, I think he's absolutely a top priority. I think they sign one of those two players this offseason. I'll be curious to see how they navigate those. As far as numbers go, DJ LeMahieu was an interesting comp for me. Chris Taylor just turned 31, so he's a little bit older. Taylor is younger than DJ LeMahieu. LeMahieu was a better player entering free agency. LeMahieu got 6 years, $90 million. Bowden projects 4 years, $64 million. I know this is a debate that you and I have had on the air and off the air, that you're expecting that number to be north of $20 million. I expect it to be right in that $16 to $18 million range. So I imagine 4 for 64, like you're doing jumping jacks and you're thrilled to sign Chris Taylor to that deal.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was going to say. I was kind of under the impression that he'd get like 480, 485, somewhere in that range. But like the Bowden prediction is kind of what I've been seeing from other people as well. So maybe I was off on that. And if I am, like, and the Dodgers are able to sign him for 464, I definitely, like you said, I'd be doing jumping jacks over the moon about that. I think that's tremendous value. 15, 16 million a year for a guy who could play every position at a like you said, he could play him at a high level, and not only that, he could swing the bat. Like, you might find a utility guy who's got a great glove and can play every position, but can't hit with a lick. Or you might find a guy who's a pretty good hitter, but he's going to give you below average defense at multiple positions. Well, Chris Taylor gives you the best case scenario for both. He gives you great defense at any position and also a plus bat. So if you could get that guy for 464, I'd drop the contract right now. Like, that's tremendous value.
Don't forget that this is a guy who comes up clutch when you needed it. Like, I think it's always a small sample size when you're looking at playoff numbers, but he's been there and he's done that, which I think helps. So let me ask you a question. I mean, if 4 for 64 is the Taylor contract and he says, I'll sign that, and Seager has 8 for 260 and he says, I'll sign that, how would you handle it? Do you sign both? Do you say, well, I'll just take the value with with Chris Taylor, and I'll allocate the other $19 million a year for the next 4 years and go out and get a starting pitcher? How would you handle if those two offers were on the table and both guys were willing to accept them?
I mean, it's hard to say no to Corey Seager, especially at that contract you just gave. Like, it's not 10 years. I'd say that's a positive right away. But I just think if you could get Chris Taylor at that value, that allows you to go out and sign a Max Scherzer, to go out and sign Max Scherzer and Clayton Kershaw, or whatever the case may be. You just have a lot more money to spend. And I think Seager's more easily replaceable. Like, we just laid it all out. They're still set if they don't have Seager, especially if you are bringing back Taylor, who fills in a lot of holes at a lot of other positions. I know that'd be kind of putting a lot of pressure on Gavin Lux as a starting second baseman. And he kind of had that same, he was in that same spot during spring training last year, and I'd say it didn't really work out how everyone had hoped. I still think we're optimistic. I don't know if we're quite as optimistic. Like, I think there was a point where we were saying Gavin Lux is a future superstar. I don't know if we're saying that anymore, but I still think he's could be a starter in the major leagues. So I think they'd like to give him that starting second base job. I think we saw the outfield experiment. Obviously he didn't play a whole lot there, so you can't fully judge it. Like, if he's taking fly balls all off season, then I'd expect him to come back as a better outfielder. But I also think that experiment didn't go as well as they had hoped. I think they'd prefer him in the infield, where I wouldn't say he's a great infielder by any means, but at least that's kind of more natural for him. And just having Taylor as opposed to Seager allows you to put guys in their more natural positions. I'd say, like, Trey Turner is a shortstop. We saw at second base he wasn't that great either, and I know he's not a great shortstop, but I'd say kind of similar to Lux. Like, that's his natural position, at least. So I think in that scenario I'd go Taylor. I wouldn't be happy about it, but I just think the other possibilities of signing a guy like Chris Taylor to 464 and having all that other money to spend,
it's a fascinating one. I honestly, I don't know what to do. I mean, I've made it clear. I think I value Trey Turner a little bit more than Corey Seager. And so, if you say Trey Turner will sign that contract, I think I would lock up Trey Turner for 8 for 260 and shed a lot of tears as Chris Taylor signs elsewhere. But who knows? I mean, again, why not do both? Like, that's an option on the table. So I will say this, prediction time, I'll go first. I think Chris Taylor's a Dodger next year. I've got Scherzer, Kershaw, and Taylor as the 3 guys of these 5 that they're going to re-sign. In your estimation, is Chris Taylor a Dodger in 2022?
I'm with you. I don't feel great about it, just because I think if they do re-sign Corey Seager, then I think that immediately goes out the window. Like, I don't see a scenario where they sign both these guys. But I'd say if I had to guess right now, I'd say Seager gets paid elsewhere. The Dodgers re-sign Taylor. I still think it'll be for more than 464. I think he deserves more than that. But if the Dodgers somehow get him for that, I think that's a huge win. And I'd say I think we had the same predictions. we both said that Scherzer, Kershaw, and Taylor are the three.
Yeah,
three
who
of the
knows?
main
Maybe the
guys that
Dodgers
will
say
be back.
screw it, and they just fill out the rotation with a bunch of Andrew Heaney types and say, we're going all in on offense. Chris Taylor, come on back. Corey Seager, come on back. And we'll just patch together a rotation of middling guys with Urias and Buehler and hope for the best from there. We'll see. So, anyways, let us know what you think below. Chris Taylor, we know he's a fan favorite. If you had to choose between Taylor at a lesser value and a shorter deal or Corey Seager, what would you do? I guess both is an acceptable answer, so let us know in the comments below. As always, check out DodgerBlue.com for the latest. If Chris Taylor makes a decision, if any of these guys decide to sign or sign elsewhere, we'll have it here for you first. DodgerBlue.com, DodgerBlue1958 on social media, DodgerBlue1958 on YouTube as well. Please subscribe and ring the notification bell. That's Daniel Starkand. My name's Jeff Spiegel. Check out the rest of our free agency primer series, and we'll see you next time.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.